All right, hey everybody, welcome to DevOps and Drinks. I am super psyched to welcome JFrog and Bill Manning, talking about some very interesting and important topics in the world of DevOps. So, just so you guys know, this is powered by Averity, the recruiting company to go to, especially for DevOps. So, on that note, no more shameless plugs. Bill, the floor is yours, sir.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. Let me share my screen. Come on, share. There we go. So, what are we going to talk about today? Right. So basically what it comes down to is, we've all heard this term about software bill of materials and SBOM. And what does that mean for a lot of corporate environments? I've been talking about this as an active subject for a while now, and it wasn't until about May that it became a thing that everybody suddenly became aware of, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. I will definitely be taking some questions as we go. Bill, I'm one of the solution architects here at JFrog. Been with the company for way too long now. But the thing is that my job is to work with our customer base to also push forward stuff like best practices and other things that we do. Just to let you know, I mean, we're like governance board members of like the Cloud Native Foundation and a lot of other things. So I dip my hands in a lot of different aspects. Ari, who's on the call here too, is one of my coworkers that I work with, and he can attest that my hands are all over the place in the company. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about things like, such as, when binaries attack. I make the joke about that, but we're going to talk about that because actually that was one of the catalysts for software bill of materials becoming actually more of an actual government regulated and mandated thing. We're going to talk about what the SBOM is. We're going to talk about, what you can do to do it. I'm going to try to avoid as much plugging JFrog as possible, but at the same time, of course, I work for JFrog and we have solutions around this. And we're going to talk also a little bit about shift left and some other things that you can do to kind of ensure software supply chain security. And then at the same time, just remember, whenever I talk to communities and stuff, I'm like, yes, we have a solution as JFrog, but at the same time, this is a really, these attacks and the reason for the SBOM is really a community thing, right? We're all in this together, software vulnerabilities and things like that really affect us all generally. But let's kick off with things, right? We read the headlines all the time. Like, this is one from November 2nd. There was a third-party transitive dependency. So if you're not an engineer, we should probably talk about that in a few minutes. But the idea is that we see these headlines all the time. Right. And a lot of organizations are hearing every day that things that they're utilizing every day is causing problems. As developers, I come from a developer background, and even in DevOps and DevSecOps and stuff like that. The thing is, we've had a level of trust for so long that we just use things, right? You have a project, you're giving a project to work on, you dissect the project, you start to build it, you use libraries to do your job, and the thing is there's always been this kind of level of trust that we've had. And the thing is as we find out though, so our supply chain, which powers every piece of software out there, 650% increase in software supply chain attacks. And this is terrible. This is a terrible statistic to know. The thing is that means that, we went from being happy developers with some sort of level of trust issues to massive trust issues going forward. Are the things that I'm utilizing really, are going to protect me? Yes, they get my job done. They allow me to do the work that I do. But the thing is that now I have to sit there and go, yeah, am I compromising my company? There's a level of risk that comes in now, and that risk is increasing all the time. And this is problematic. And the thing is that this was actually a huge thing that's been going on for a long time. This actually is nothing new. And it just, the thing is like, it started even way back in the days, basically the first kind of like attacks that happened in the early 80s with hacking. And now it's actually just gotten more, inherently significant to a lot of other ways and means that companies are doing this. And, the level of complexity. And actually, in some cases, I look at some of these things that are going on right now, and I look at the level of attacks that are going on, and the elegance in which they're doing it is incredible. And the big thing, though, is that there was one event in all these kind of software supply chain attacks that really kicked off the need for the software bill of materials. And SolarWinds was the fire that lit everybody's ass on fire, right? This is the thing that happened. And the best part about this, though, is it actually was a good and a bad thing. Bad in the fact that this can cause billions of dollars of companies to remediate over time. Good in the fact that it actually caused awareness on a subject that people have been screaming about forever. That finally, you know what, it got everybody's attention, right? 18,000 customers were affected by the Orion product. And really what happened with it, by the way, just so you know, it was a really sophisticated attack. All software has dependencies, right? 85 to 95% of your software is dependencies. And the thing is that this came in as a third-party indirect resource. It means that it was a library that was called by a library that was caused by another library, and it was buried deep inside. It was in this massive kind of constraint. And then the best part about it was, and I will say the best part, because like I said, I kind of respect the way in which they did this attack, was that they put in a timer, right? So it wasn't immediately. It wasn't like you took it, you deployed it, and then suddenly something happened. They actually took the time and effort to say, when the software got pushed out to 18,000 customers, by the way, including, and this is the reason why the fire went under everybody's butt, was like the Department of Justice, the DOD, the Federal Reserve Bank. I mean, these are all companies that use SolarWinds. And suddenly, 14 days after the update was installed, it just said, hey, I'm going to open everything to everyone. Like I said, it was a very highly coordinated, sophisticated attack that was done, and it really drove the awareness. And, to understand some of these pieces, I'm just going to kind of go through some rudimentary basics, because this leads up to the reason why software supply chain is so important. And when you talk to your customers, or you internally, externally, whatever, understanding, why is software supply chain attacks, the way they are. So on the right-hand side, we have Zeridium, right? This is like things that are the normal stuff that you see, right? These are like DDoS attacks and things like that you would normally see. And why is software supply chain attacks different, right? It's low effort. It doesn't take a lot of technical skill, really. It's really easy to spread, right? Because it's all done the way it's done. And then also, the problem is, though, that there's suddenly this abuse of trust relationship, right? The one thing this, a lot of these supply chain attacks do is they break the ability for developers to develop, and by having more constraints put upon them, simply because this is an awareness. A lot of companies are like, throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? They don't take the time and effort to kind of sit back and say, all right, these are sophisticated attacks, but there has to be ways to defend ourselves, and there has to be a way to have accountability. But the razor thing, though, is that attackers just simply blend, right? That's the thing is that these attackers simply inherently bring themselves into the communities around the technologies they're looking to attack, and nobody even knows they're there, right? They create backdoors, they create malicious code, they inject it in, they say, hey, I'm going to improve the function of a library, and they do that, and they say, suddenly there's an extra transitive dependency brought in, and that one could be the attack. But it's amazing because simply they blend. You don't even know they're there. They actually, a lot of them, like some of the people who did some of the bigger attacks, they were actually heavily contributed members of certain development societies. And suddenly, behind the scenes, they grabbed the charts. It couldn't be me. I've been teaching you guys all along, these kind of things. But the way the attacks occur is that if I'm a developer and I'm writing my code, I inherently have these transitive dependencies that I need to build. I pick the transitive dependencies that I use, those forms and functions and things that make my job easier to do to produce the software I produce. And the thing is, though, is if I have something that is potentially nefarious inside, suddenly it's part of the program that I'm offering. And when I give it to my customer, I'm actually, unbeknownst to them, giving it to them, right? That it's basically part of the software delivery. Now, this doesn't just make it bad for the customer. This makes it bad for your organization. Suddenly, there's a trust relationship issue, right? The trust is a big thing. But in some cases, this might be a direct dependency attack. Like you don't even know it's there, but it's a direct dependency used. But the more dangerous aspect is those indirect dependencies, right? The dependencies that your dependencies depend on. because that actually goes ahead and actually continues that same model, that same effect that you're doing. Because 85 to 90% of your code is someone else's. When somebody builds software, they depend on that. 99% of that, right, is actually open source. And then 75% of that has at least one one vulnerable component that's part of this. And it might not be a direct call that you do. And then 49% of the code base contains at least one high vulnerability aspect of the code that they're building. And the fact is that 90% of those are also out of date. The thing is that there's products out there that are either, like these components that you use that are abandoned, they haven't been updated in years, and people still rely on them. And, it's dangerous, right? And that's the thing. And SolarWinds really exemplified, these kind of things, because the thing is that actually 74% of those binaries out of all that huge mess could simply be alleviated and fixed with simple remediation. Like simply updating a version, understanding that, a version that you've been using for a while, or you bring in a library, might have some sort of level of issue when it comes to, security vulnerabilities or things like that. And if just by having a simple fix, you can actually even just start increasing your basically your security output, and making sure that when you're building stuff that, and this goes, by the way, for DevSecOps in general, right? And understanding, how the software is composed and all that really is the reason why SBOM came about. Because when software attacks, it comes in many different forms, whether it's, things like dependency typo squatting. This is a big one we see all the time. We actually helped find a Python library that was there. And, really what it came down to was just a typo dependency attack. Somebody fat fingered something, and suddenly they bring in a malicious version over another. Dependency confusion. This is a huge one. We have a large customer base. We have over 7,000 customers, right? We have 70% of the Fortune 100 companies that are out there. We're used by a lot of government organizations. We're actually part of Platform One, which is U.S. government's regulated, approved software tools. We're in Iron Bank, which is the regimented version of Docker, basically of a Docker hub that's used for all government agencies. But we also have all these customers that we work with, and we're helping them constantly over all the time and try to alleviate the number of breaches that they have. And dependency confusion is a huge one. This is one we see a lot with a lot of the customers we work with. And the idea here is just that it just goes in, it just tricks the coder into doing what they're doing. I mean, if you look here, you can see like PayPal, right? All these PayPal ones are fake, by the way. But somebody did a search and said, how does PayPal handle this? I did a quick search, and these are the ones that came back, and these are not true. These are actually fake ones that actually contain malicious code inside. But I said, if I didn't know any better, I saw, oh, look, this is actually a PayPal analytics portion. Well, that's great. I'll go use it. Well, I'd be deadly wrong. So understanding this is just understanding what you need to do. And the thing is, though, is understanding how your software is made up is the reason why accountability is paramount now in DevSecOps. And really what it came down to was, back in May, the Biden administration sat down and actually said, we need to improve our cybersecurity footprint. And they put together this, this mandate that went out. And one of the biggest ones was enhancing software supply chain security. And the major portion here is being able to provide a software bill of materials to anybody who either directly or indirectly downloads your software or uses it, but also to have the ability for them to download basically a list of how your software was actually built. What does it contain? And so luckily, about a week ago, actually, this passed in the House, right? So it's making its way to becoming an actual thing. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you are working with the government, this is also going to bleed into everything around the private sector. We already see this with the aeronautics industry customers we have. We see this with the medtech and fintech companies we have, because they actually are saying, you know what? This actually is a good thing. Us having a record of all this is really something that we need to do. And in the future, if I wanted to do any work with, say, the government or other agencies that say, hey, you know what, we've adopted this thing that if we purchase software from you, we really need to make sure we have that software bill of materials. So this way we know what's in there. And I'll demystify some of the things that a lot of people ask all the time around this. But The idea of it actually spurned from its work with of all people, the FDA. Right. So this actually started a couple of years ago. And then when this all happened, the administration actually latched onto this and said, this is a good idea. And why did the FDA do that? Right? Because the FDA did the same thing with ingredients when you actually have any sort of food, right? What is in it? You need to know the ingredients that are in there. You need to know, does it contain things that could potentially hurt me? And the thing is that with the National Telecommunication Information Administration and the FDA got together for some medical devices. It's funny, as about a year and a half ago, I gave a talk on this called If Code Could Kill, right? And it was a really grim presentation, but I showed all the ways in which software bugs and potentially malicious code cause people to die. Right. And, like I was like, here's a plane crash, and here's some people whose ventilators got shut off. Right. These are things that are happening. So the FDA stepped in 2018 and said, hey, we need to know what goes into medical devices. We need to know every aspect of this. And they started building out the regulation behind it. And then that regulation got adopted into what we call now the software bill of materials around improving the nation's cybersecurity. It was really an amazing, it was something that was actually needed. And I'm really surprised back then that it took to 2018 for people to realize this, right? That this was a thing. And the thing is, it was a way for the med companies to inform the purchasers of what was going into the software that was operating the stuff that they were utilizing to basically keep people alive, right? And so when you look at the software bill of materials, and this aspect behind it is it's a list of ingredients of the software, right? This includes the libraries, it includes all the open source properties, free and paid, anything like that. And you could also, and this is where, like for JFrog, what we do is we actually have the ability, just so the adopted format right now in the US government is SPDX, but there's also the other format of this called CycloneDX, and you can export this information starting probably next month with us as a format. So we actually had the software bill of materials, including things like environmental variables and tooling and settings and things like that. What makes up that software in our product for over, I think, almost 8 years now. But being able to have all that information is really what the software bill of materials is. It's for the people who produce software, right? So they take it, it's a good catalog that you can have internally. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. It's also for the people that you deal with as an organization. The thing is they can ask you now. They can say, hey, this is great software, but we want to, for our legal purposes, we're trying to, make sure for liability reasons and things like that, we need to know how your software is made, as we purchase it, because we need to have this on record. And then the other part of it is for people who operate software. I download the software as an organization and I use it. The thing is that what if a new 0-day vulnerability comes about? I want to know about it. And we'll talk about that too. So this way, as a implementer of software, an operator of software, if I read the news and Hacker News that suddenly, XYZ company had a compromised system and somebody goes, hey, we're using that. It would be nice to have the ability to say, oh, read the report, what is in it, and then say, do we have that in ours? Right? It's things like root cause analysis problems and being able to decipher whether or not you've infected your customer or your internal customers and potentially expose them this way. And this is just a way for you to kind of have accountability. So the thing is, though, with the benefits of the SBOM is like identifying the pieces and also having known vulnerabilities, right? Understanding licensing, right? How much licensing do I have? That's part of the bill of materials too. Did I purchase 4 of these? Did I purchase 5? Does this actually constitute the service that I'm doing? It satisfies both security and licensing requirements with most organizations. And as I stated, the adoption of this methodology is going up constantly. So this is just being preemptive, saying, government first, and then of course private sector comes later, because it's actually a good idea. And then also too, it's a way for companies, even before they purchase their software, to look at it and look for any potential inherent risks. Does it use something that we've actually blacklisted as a technology? Does this potentially give us exposure, and understanding all that. And then in the long term, it actually also lowers operation costs, because the thing is you're not digging, right? You don't have to go and start digging. If you purchase from a vendor, you should have it already, or if you don't have it, you can request it. So it cuts down on the amount of time that you might have in terms, having maybe doing a post-mortem, or even before you put it in place, understanding, like I said, am I potentially risking my organization, which could also hurt my reputation both externally but also financially? Because let's face it, nobody wants to be a headline. No company wants to be like, hey, you know what? Hey, look, we got a headline. No, there's no such thing as bad press, but all that customer leaked information, it's okay. We'll recover from it. Right. And so this is just ways to start combating that. So once again, going back to our scenario I showed before, when we were discussing, understanding, is there potential threats in what I do? This is a big thing, understanding these third-party transitive dependencies, and I don't want to do that. Well, let's look at this again. So when I look at this now, I can actually go ahead, and when I pull those libraries in and I have those software bill of materials, I can take all that information and put in my software bill of materials and give it to the customer. Now, I also know that if something changed between versions, I can give them a new software bill of materials, and they can say, oh, this component changed from this version to the next. But also, they can look ahead and say, oh, by the way, there was something nefarious that happened. We read the news, and now we went in and we checked our software bill of materials, and there's something wrong there. But that's only for a single instance, right? That's just understanding how the software is made. But what if I look at that software bill of materials and I go, well, you know what? These are all the versions that we ran. And actually, that version of that component has actually been in the last 3 releases, and the latest version doesn't have that. So it's also understanding blast radius. I always talk about blast radius when you discover something in the way you do your software, and suddenly you go, oh my God, how far did this go back? And I'll just show you a real world example just quickly. Is that with our product, one of the things that we do when we show this is the product-y portion where I can just show you a real world example. But at the same time, let me go in and say I suddenly find a package like Babel, right? So this is a standard NPM library that I'm utilizing. And I go in and I look and I say, oh my God, 6.23, we've used this in every version of our user interface since we started the product. Well, let me see. Well, how far back does this go? Well, oh my, well, here's all the builds that have ever referenced actually this library, and software bill of materials allows you to have this level of kind of depth where you can go ahead. Like when we produce it, we provide information. If they request it, you can request that information and say, here's every version of something that was there. This has been deployed everywhere. This is bad. Right? How do we remediate this? So understanding that, and this also carries over into more complex things, even Docker runtimes, right? Virtualization is a thing. And you can produce things around, in software bill of materials, even around things like containers. It doesn't have to be an executable. It doesn't have to be, some companies just produce libraries that are used in other people's products, right? Or, maybe you have a web service, understanding not only the application that's running, but understanding the runtime that powers it, understanding the OS below that. These are things that companies are going to come to expect. I mean, this even comes down to even things like I said, like web services, where you might even have a Helm chart. And with a Helm chart like this, you can actually go ahead and say, isolate out of this Helm chart from those. I can even have a bill of materials there to say, hey, you know what? This pod running this image inside of this web service contains the actual vulnerability that we're doing. This is actively running in our environment right now. Everybody scream, run, and panic because we have to go take care of this. But at least you have an isolated information. You know where to start. Right? You have the basic X on the map where you need to start to get to the endpoint where you need to actually finish. Instead of saying, everybody panic, let's go look, it's going to take us 2 or 3 days to find this. This helps reduce that, right? So the thing is that the faster you can respond is one thing, but the faster you can respond with more intelligent information is better. right? So when you're not going to go into a battle without knowing the field. There's a reason why people send scout, an army sends scouts first and get the lay of the land and try to do that, right? In this case, you have a map. You have a place to start and go in and start creating your root cause analysis while still having accountability. And the byproduct of this is that when you do fix these issues, you can assure your customers, both internally and externally, by the way, that you've addressed this issue by producing a new software bill of materials. You can say, look, we addressed the issue just to show you, here's the proof, right? In this case, you have a digital asset that can represent the value that you provide by saying, we addressed this issue, and that going forward, this, hopefully this won't be a thing. So, I mean, most of us, when we're working in these kind of things, we understand that this is normal life. So, cutting down on the actual amount of legwork you have to do by having the proper set of information to do the job that you do is essential. And the thing is that when we start talking about the life of a binary, and it's funny, I always feel like I have to have like a David Attenborough voice whenever I talk about this kind of stuff, because the thing is, though, is it's like understanding the journey of the way software is built, right? It's a living, breathing entity. No matter what people think, it's not just some stagnant, set of things you do. It's a constantly evolving and changing thing. From the moment that a developer brings in something to the time it gets compiled and deployed, whether it's to a customer or to a service or whatever, the thing is, it's alive. And then, so when you look at this, like we do things like with like partners, like, some of the companies we work with, like 23andMe, right? We help them find an injection problem. We actually just became a CVE authority, and I'm super excited about this. And the fact that we have a research team that can actually now produce CVEs to let other companies know and developers know, hey, you're doing something bad with something good with something bad. Basically, I always like that's more along the lines of it. But empowering people like the developers, right? We all hear the term shift left. The idea is if you want the maximum ROI on all this stuff, which directly affects the software bill of materials, you need to go start at the developer, right? This is the front line defense against everything that you're doing. Giving your developers the ability to go in and look at the libraries in a way that is more of a diagnostic and is something actionable, right? So not just telling them they're doing something bad, but also telling them that, by the way, if you go from this and you upgrade to another version, you'll be able to fix this potential threat. Being able to go ahead and diagnose all the things that are going on directly influences the way the software bill of materials is done, because this, like I said, trust is something that is in some cases is basically, it's hard to gain, but it's easy to lose, right? And regaining trust is doubly hard. But if you can have the awareness, if you can have cleaner builds, if you can have more effective ways to have accountability in the way you do software, produce the software bill of materials to assure your customers that you know what's in your software, you know how it was built. Here's all the information. And then be able to say to them, as you have issues or issues come about, you're addressing them. Like how far does how deep does the rabbit hole go? Understanding, yes, we know that things have been affected over time, and what's the blast radius of it? Being able to trace and act more effectively and be able to go ahead and actually address those issues as they come in real time or as close to real time as possible. And we have ways for our stuff to do, like this is like kind of the DevOps, our kind of stuff. But the thing is, though, it's continuous. This is something that's just not you implement and it just happens once. This is a continuous thing. This should be part of every part of your development cycle, because by having this accountability, it reduces liability. It increases trust, because suddenly you're providing information to your customers that you're opening, you're exposing. Here's the information, just so you're aware. We're not afraid to tell you what stuff we used. Now, this is the thing. These are, you'll see in a minute, like make sure you have approval processes, make sure you have some sort of accountability as part of this. These are the things that we offer. I'm running out of time and I'm sorry. But I want to talk about misconceptions. And we get the subjections all the time. And so won't this give a roadmap to attackers? I got asked this question, actually. And I said, no. No, because it's just like the cake box ingredients, right? I might show you what I used to make it, right? I might show you the ingredients. You have no idea what I used. You have no idea how I mixed it together. You have no idea what I had the oven set for, right? It doesn't, there's no source code involved in this, right? Doesn't expose source code at all. All it's saying is that we built something, we utilized these pieces to do it. We actually used this sort of level of environment, and we also, we have some relative information to provide you to say it was built on this day, this time, and this is what it has. And it might contain nuts, right? I mean, that's the, it might have contained some food allergy substances, whatever. We give, and this is just the thing is that it doesn't expose your intellectual property again. Just because you have a chocolate cake, I actually gave a whole webinar on this and I got bored. So I decided the entire webinar was based on cake instead. I'm like, I can give you a chocolate cake and you can eat it and say, that's delicious. And I can say, here's my ingredients. And I'm like, well, I need your recipe. I'll be like, I'm not giving you my recipe. You just eat the cake, right? But these are the stuff I use. You figure it out yourself. I'm not exposing any intellectual property because, to be honest, anybody can download your software and technically reverse engineer what you do and do something, which they do all the time. But without your secret sauce, without knowing, that part of it, you have a bottle of grandma's essential oils that you put in, and you're not even sure what that is, into your cake, and it makes it taste wonderful. You might just say grandma's stuff. And that's all you have to say. You're not exposing how you did it. You're just, the thing is, software bill of materials is just a liability accountability kind of thing that you need to do. It gives companies assurance that they say, hey, by the way, we know what's in there. If we read an article that something is bad, we actually can go review it, say that we know what's in there, that you can contact them and say, we're addressing it, send them a new version and say, look, guys, we fixed it. Right? You don't have to actually go in and try to explain how you fix it. You just say, look, that vulnerability that was stated on there that you read about because some CIO was, sitting in the bathroom on his iPhone reading, gets a notification that says, everything Python is bad. And then suddenly he goes, oh my God, we got to go do something. This, you go, look, we're not using that anymore. This has been addressed. But you know what? Hey guys, just so you understand, go check your environment because the past 4 version of it did contain this and we recommend you upgrade. Now you have some validity behind it. You have the chance to actually stand your ground and say, look, you know what? You can trust us again. We went and fixed it. It's a way to also reduce some of the trust that you lose when something like this happens. It's inevitable. The headline comes out immediately. If somebody suspects that your software is part of this, they are going to lose trust in you immediately because you use something bad without understanding that maybe it happened that day. Right? You might have been using it for 4 years, but suddenly it's a new 0 day. And, but to someone else, they read it and they go, well, you know what? This software is terrible. It actually has stuff in it that is broken. What are we doing? And so when you look at this is going to be needed to work with the US government, right? It provides a FOSS list, right? Free and open source software. I always love the analogy. I'm like, free as in speech, not as in beer. And then it's the whole idea of, how, what, when it was made, auditability, traceability, understanding your components, software compliance and security. It makes lawyers happy. What you have to make sure. It makes accountants happy because they make sure that their bottom line isn't affected. It gives, it's nice, warm, fuzzy, SBOM blanket that can, you can wrap around your customer to say it's going to be okay. And then at the same time, the idea is that, it's easy to implement in some respects, but there is some work people need to do. Like, here's my JFrog pitch. We handle this in this thing called build info. I can show you just really quick. For me, whenever I do a build, and if you're using our product, to produce this, how do I know what's in my software? And I'll just show you, here's an example of a software build I do for NPM. And, it's a tar GZ, right? But, here's all 611 transitive dependencies that made it up. Right? Here's the environmental information on how I built it. Here's the X-ray data on, do I have any level of security threats with the software I'm doing? Right? These are kind of things. So here's the license files that I've had as part of this, right? These are all the things that make up a software bill of materials. So from the product e-pitch side, this is what we do. JFrog itself, just so you guys know, we call ourselves the Universal Binary Repository Manager. Yes, it's a mouthful. What do? We manage those transitive dependencies. We have our X-ray product to say, hey, by the way, things that you're doing are nefarious. That, if I bring up my, like my IDE, here it is right here, right? I can go ahead, but I have remediation that I can do. If I go ahead and, I'm working in a command line, I have the ability to go in and directly access, any of the, I don't think I have it open right now. But, oh, I do. The thing is like, here's an example of a project I'm working on. I can go scan those dependencies I have to make sure I'm not injecting something potentially threatening. Right. And this, the thing is like, we're trying to combat this. We're trying to lead the charge on this. And like I said, we have a huge amount of customers that utilize us for this. And now the bonus by using us is the fact that they can go in and they'll be able to export software bill of materials. And in addition to this, I'm just going to show you quickly, is the fact I'm going to, you guys can just go use our free tier and play around with this all you want. I'll put it in the chat for you guys. But in the meantime, while I'm doing that, any questions? I did throw a lot at you, but because I was trying to be conscious of how much time I actually had. And guys, by the way, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's definitely a good thing. And I hope I taught you something today.
This is great. This is a lot of information that you banged out. Thank you very, very much.
No worries at all. And here, I'll just do this ready, and then thank you. So,
does anybody have any questions for Bill? There's a lot of information here, so fire away at him. This is great.
I thought I only had 30 minutes, like I was like, crunch it down as much as I can.
Any questions at all, or do we have a shy group today?
Don't be shy.
Shy group. All right, Ari.
Well, they
even
closed off the calendar.
Sorry about that. Step away for 1 second, and I hear my name. How are you?
That's how it goes. Ari works for JFrog as well. You had some swag to give out.
I do. So we have. So the good news is, it looks like because of the numbers today, everyone's going to be eligible for this. Let me just share my screen.
Everyone gets a thing.
Everyone gets a thing. Yeah.
You get a thing. You get a thing. You get a thing.
Let's see. Let me just share my screen really quick. And so basically, here's a QR code, and I'll drop a link in as well if you can see it. But basically, you get we're going to give out our annual T-shirt, which is going to be discontinued very shortly because we're going to get a new annual T-shirt, and a copy of a Liquid software book. So it's combo. We'll send out. The bit.ly we have is jfrog.co/DevOps drinks, and yeah, it's yours. It's yours to have. We'll mail it out to you free of charge, and hope you enjoy both. I actually joined JFrog because of their T-shirts. I'm surprised they offer when I found out they were going to pay me money too. That was a bonus. But this year is our annual T-shirt is going to be discontinued. So we have a lot of fun with those. So yeah, for everybody here, this is for you, and I'll drop the link here. That's it.
Somebody actually asked a question. Hey, Lance, just so you know, we cover over 30 package types. So natively out of the box. I put the link in for the free tier, and you play around with it all you want. I'm on Twitter too. Reach out if you want. And I'm looking for my invite, Alec, in January, so I can make it back home. Come see you guys. Maybe come to World Trade.
Yep, the next one's in person. We're actually meeting as real humans to drink together. It will be fun. So if you're in New York, come on down. Bill, get down here. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. By the way, and you have my. I think I'm part of the email thread. Maybe Ari has. You get my information. Ping me. Let's chit chat, dude. Seriously,
yeah,
that's pretty rad.
Guys, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for spending your lunch with us. And we're not doing in December, so enjoy the rest of your year, and we're coming back strong in January. Hopefully we'll do some more with the good folks at JFrog. Bill, that was awesome. Thank you so much for putting that together. Ari, thanks for organizing this.
Great. It was great seeing you.
Be safe, be wonderful, be well, everyone. Cheers.
Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Rock on.
Bye.